My wife had an affair with my best friend while I was working 80-hour weeks to buy our dream house. Now, they're both homeless and begging for one last chance to make things right. But I'm not buying it. I, 35M, discovered last month that my wife, Sarah, 33F, had been sleeping with my best friend Mike, 34M, for the past year while I was working myself to death to afford our dream home. The worst part? Mike was living in our guest house rent-free because I was helping him get back on his feet after his divorce. Some background. Sarah and I met in college 13 years ago at a campus coffee shop. I still remember exactly how she looked that day. Paint-splattered jeans, a messy bun, and these bright green eyes that seemed to see right through me. She was struggling with a massive canvas, trying to get it through the door without spilling her coffee. I held the door, she smiled, and that was it. I was gone. Our friends always joked about how unlikely we were as a couple. She was this vibrant art student who lit up every room she entered, while I was the quiet engineering major who'd rather solve equations than socialize. Somehow she saw something in me. We dated for 4 years before getting married, and those were the happiest years of my life. After graduation, I landed a job at a top tech company while Sarah pursued her passion for painting. Our early married life was simple but perfect. We lived in a small apartment where Sarah converted half our living room into her studio. I'd come home to find her covered in paint, music blasting, totally lost in her art. She'd always stop what she was doing to greet me with a kiss, not caring that she was getting paint all over my work clothes. Those moments, as small as they were, made all the long hours worth it. Every weekend, we'd have these elaborate breakfast dates where we'd plan our future together. Kids, names, travel destinations, and always that Victorian house. The money was good, but the hours were brutal. I'm talking 60 to 80-hour weeks, constant travel, and missing holidays. I missed our third anniversary because of a crucial project in Japan. Sarah said she understood, but I spent a fortune sending her a massive flower arrangement and scheduling a private chef to cook her favorite meal. I'd do video calls during my lunch breaks just to see her face, even if it meant eating at my desk at 3 a.m. Every promotion, every bonus, every successful project was for our future. I had a 5-year plan mapped out on a spreadsheet, complete with investment projections, estimated property values, and even calculations for future children's college funds. Sarah used to tease me about being so methodical, but she'd always kiss me and say, "That's why we work so well together. You're the dreamer, and I'm the one who can make those dreams reality." But we had a dream, this beautiful Victorian house. We'd drive by every weekend. Sarah would sketch it, imagining where her art studio would be, planning the garden she'd plant. That house became our goal. 4 years ago, Mike went through a nasty divorce. I remember the night he showed up at our door, and broken. Sarah made him coffee while I helped him sober up. He'd been my best man at our wedding, had helped me pick out Sarah's engagement ring, and was there for every major moment of my life. When he told us his wife had been cheating with his business partner and was taking everything in the divorce, I felt sick for him. The irony of that moment haunts me now. His ex took everything, leaving him practically homeless. Being my best friend since high school, I couldn't just watch him suffer. So, I offered him our guest house rent-free until he could get back on his feet. Sarah was supportive of the idea. Too supportive, I realize now. The house finally went on the market last year. The price was steep, $1.2 million. But I had been saving and investing aggressively. I took on extra projects, worked weekends, anything to make it happen. Sarah seemed understanding, even encouraging. "You're working so hard for our future," she'd say. "I'm so lucky to have such a dedicated husband." What I didn't know was that while I was myself at work, she was our marriage at home. Looking back, there were signs I chose to ignore. The way she'd suddenly hang up when I walked into the main house from my office. How she started taking extra care with her appearance on days I had late meetings. The mysterious gym sessions that always seemed to coincide with Mike's personal training schedule. The new lingerie I'd find in the laundry that I'd never seen her wear. Mike's guest house was on the other side of our property, giving them plenty of privacy while I was working long hours at the office. They probably thought they were being clever, but our security cameras caught everything. I just never thought to check them until after I caught them. I even remember one night, exhausted from a 16-hour workday, catching a glimpse of them in the garden, standing too close, laughing at some private joke. But I trusted them both so completely that I buried any suspicion under layers of denial. After all, this was my best friend since high school, the guy who'd helped me through my father's death, who'd been there for every major moment of my life. And Sarah, she was my everything. The thought of them betraying me was so painful that my mind simply refused to process the possibility. The truth came out in the most cliché way possible. That Friday had started so well. I picked up celebration champagne and Sarah's favorite takeout from the Italian place where we had our first date. I even bought fresh flowers, purple orchids, her favorite. I remember standing at our front door, arms full of bags, heart full of excitement about sharing the promotion news. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, Sarah had music playing while she painted. That should have been my first clue. I came home early one Friday, wanting to surprise Sarah with the news that I'd gotten the promotion that would finally let us afford the house. Instead, I found them together in our bed. The bed I had bought for our 5th anniversary. I just stood there, frozen. Mike scrambled to get dressed, stammering excuses. Sarah wrapped herself in our sheets, the ones her mother had given us for Christmas, and started crying. "It's not what it looks like," she said. Except it was exactly what it looked like. The next hour was a blur of accusations and confessions. Turned out they'd been sleeping together for over a year. Every late night I spent at the office, every weekend I worked to save for our dream house, they were together in my home, sometimes in my bed. "You were never here," Sarah sobbed. "I was lonely. Mike was there for me." Mike tried to apologize, said it just happened, that they never meant to me. "We couldn't help our feelings," he said. Like that somehow made betraying your best friend okay. I didn't yell. I didn't break things. I just felt empty. 8 years of marriage, 15 years of friendship gone in an instant. I walked out of the bedroom, went to my home office, and called my lawyer. Here's where it gets interesting. Remember how I said I'd been saving aggressively? Well, I hadn't just been saving for the house. I'm a planner. Always have been. I had multiple investment accounts, retirement funds, and a hefty emergency fund. Sarah knew about some of it, but not all. She had signed a prenup before our marriage. Her idea, actually. She said she never wanted anyone to think she was with me for money. That prenup turned out to be her undoing. It specified that in case of infidelity, the cheating spouse would forfeit all rights to marital assets. When I had it drafted, I never thought I'd need it. Sarah insisted on adding that clause herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity, with evidence our security cameras had caught them countless times. I kicked Mike out of the guest house immediately. Sarah tried to apologize, begged for another chance, said we could go to counseling, but I was done. Then came the financial fallout. Sarah had quit her job as an art teacher 3 years ago to focus on her art. I'd supported her dream, paying all our bills, funding her studio, buying her supplies. She had a small inheritance from her grandmother, but she'd already spent most of it on art supplies and workshops before quitting her job. Now, she had no income and no savings to fall back on. Mike wasn't doing much better. He'd been living rent-free in my guest house, working part-time as a personal trainer. Most of his money went to alimony for his ex-wife. When I kicked him out, he had nowhere to go. The divorce was finalized last week. Thanks to the prenup and evidence of infidelity, Sarah got nothing except her personal belongings and her car. She's moved in with her sister temporarily, trying to sell her artwork online to make ends meet. Mike is couch-surfing between mutual friends, most of whom have taken my side after learning what happened. And that dream house? I bought it 3 months ago. The promotion came through, and without having to support Sarah and Mike, I could easily afford the mortgage. I've spent these past months renovating it, erasing every trace of the future Sarah had planned. The irony isn't lost on me. I worked so hard for this house because it was our dream. And now it's just mine. Sarah came by yesterday to collect the last of her things. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in weeks. She tried to talk to me again, said she missed me, that she made a horrible mistake. "That house was supposed to be ours," she said, crying. "We were supposed to grow old there together." I just looked at her and said, "You should have thought about that before sleeping with my best friend in our bed." She left sobbing. Mike texted me later, asking if we could talk, maybe salvage our friendship. I blocked his number. I should feel vindicated. They're both suffering the consequences of their actions. The prenup worked exactly as intended. I got the house we always wanted. But sitting here alone in this big, beautiful Victorian, I just feel empty. The art studio I planned to surprise Sarah with is just a storage room now. The garden she designed remains unplanted. I'm not angry anymore, just disappointed. I gave everything to build a future with someone who couldn't even stay faithful long enough to see it. Now, I have the house of our dreams. But the dream itself is dead. I've started renovating the house, something Sarah and I had planned to do together. Each change feels like reclaiming a piece of myself. The kitchen she wanted painted yellow. I made it a sleek modern gray. The vintage chandelier she'd picked out for the dining room, replaced with contemporary lighting. Every choice is a reminder that this is my house now. My life. My future. Last week, I found the last box of wedding photos while clearing out the attic. There was one of Mike giving his best man speech, his hand on my shoulder, both of us laughing. Another of Sarah dancing with her dad, looking so innocent in her white dress. Like the others I'd found over the past months, I burned these in the backyard fire pit too. Each photo curled and blackened in the flames. Years of memories turning to ash. There was our engagement photo, taken at sunset on the beach. The Christmas card where we wore matching sweaters. Dozens of candid moments where we looked so happy, so in love. The last one I burned was from the day we got the keys to our first apartment, Sarah on my back, both of us grinning like idiots. So young and full of dreams. As I watched that photo burn, something broke inside me. I sat there by the fire pit until sunrise, finally letting myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost. Not just my wife and my best friend, but my faith in love itself, my ability to trust, my vision of the future. I cried until I had nothing left, then went inside and started planning the renovations. If I couldn't fix my broken heart, at least I could fix this house. It's been 2 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, thank you all for the supportive comments. Reading them helped me through some really dark nights in this too big house. Remember how I mentioned Sarah was trying to sell her artwork online? Well, she's been struggling. Turns out most of her clients were my coworkers and their wives, who bought her paintings as a favor to me. Now that everyone knows what she did, those commissions have dried up. Mike's situation has gotten even worse. After couch surfing for a while, he tried to move in with Sarah at her sister's place. That lasted exactly 3 days before her sister kicked them both out. Apparently, watching your sister throw away a stable marriage for a homeless personal trainer wasn't sitting well with her. They got an apartment together, a tiny studio in the bad part of town. Sarah's been trying to find teaching jobs, but our divorce drama somehow made it to the local mom groups, and no private school will touch her. Mike's client list has shrunk to almost nothing. Turns out people don't want a homewrecker as their personal trainer. The karma gets better. Remember Sarah's art studio that I converted to storage? I donated all her leftover supplies to the local high school's art program. The teacher there, Mike's ex-wife, sent me a thank you note that just said, "Justice served." I might frame it. I've started therapy, which is helping. My therapist pointed out something interesting. I was so focused on providing the perfect life for Sarah, I missed the signs that she was unhappy. Not that it excuses what she did, but it's something I need to work on for future relationships. Speaking of relationships, I've started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee meetups arranged by friends. It's strange being single in my mid-30s, but it's also liberating. I forgot what it's like to spend money on myself instead of funding someone else's dreams. The house is starting to feel more like mine. I've redecorated, erasing traces of the future Sarah had planned. The garden she designed. I hired a landscaper to create something completely different. Every room she had mapped out in her sketchbook now serves a different purpose. Her dream art studio is becoming my home gym. Sarah and Mike tried to reconcile with mutual friends, sending long, emotional emails about how they found true love and hoping people could be happy for them. The emails were masterpieces of self-delusion. They painted themselves as tragic romantic heroes forced to choose between loyalty and love. Sarah wrote about how she'd been emotionally neglected while I worked long hours, conveniently forgetting that those hours were funding her art career and our future home. Mike claimed he tried to fight his feelings, but their connection was too powerful to deny. Apparently, not powerful enough to make him give up free housing and financial support, though. They even had the audacity to suggest hosting a dinner party to clear the air and help everyone understand their side of the story. It was like they were living in some romantic drama where the power of true love justifies any betrayal, completely blind to the real-world consequences of their actions. It backfired spectacularly. One friend replied all with a simple, "You spelled 'we are selfish a-holes' wrong." That ended those attempts. The most satisfying moment came last week. Sarah's mother, who had always treated me like a son, called. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to sell Sarah's car, the one I let her keep out of pity. Turns out Sarah can't afford the payments anymore. I agreed to buy it back for half its value. Her mother thanked me and then said something that hit hard. I always worried she'd end up like her father. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the cheating tree. That's when I learned Sarah's dad hadn't moved away for work when she was young. He'd run off with his secretary. Sarah had never told me. Makes me wonder what else she kept hidden during our marriage. I still have moments of sadness, usually late at night when the house feels too quiet. But they're getting less frequent each day. I'm more grateful that I discovered their affair before buying the house, before having kids, before wasting more years on people who didn't deserve my loyalty. Mike and Sarah are still together, living in their tiny studio, probably realizing that true love doesn't pay the bills. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my dream house, healing, growing, and slowly building a new dream, one that doesn't depend on someone else's loyalty. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their choices. In this case, those consequences are quite comfortable for me, and quite uncomfortable for them. Last week, I drove past their apartment building on my way to work. Sarah was outside, struggling with groceries from a discount store. She looked nothing like the confident artist I married, just another tired person in worn-out clothes, loading bags into a up car. Our eyes met for a brief moment and I saw something I didn't expect: defeat. This was the woman who used to light up galleries with her presence, who could charm anyone with her smile, who had such big dreams for our future. Now, she was struggling to carry generic brand groceries to a car that probably wouldn't pass its next inspection. Part of me wanted to stop and help her with those bags, like I used to. But then I remembered finding them in our bed. Remembered all the lies, all the betrayal. I remembered how they laughed together in our garden while I worked overtime to build our future. I remembered the pain in my mother's voice when I told her about the affair. She loved Sarah like a daughter. So, I kept driving, watching in my rearview mirror as she struggled with those bags alone. If I felt any satisfaction seeing her like that, it was overshadowed by sadness for what could have been. Later that day, I got a text from Mike's ex-wife, Katie. She heard through mutual friends that Sarah had tried to sell some of her paintings at the local art fair, the same one where she used to be a featured artist. Apparently, she couldn't even afford the booth fee and had to set up in the free section with the student artists. She sold nothing. Katie said she walked by Sarah's sad little display several times, watching her former friend's humiliation with what she called expensive therapy. I couldn't blame her for the schadenfreude. Karma has a way of coming full circle. That evening, I hosted a dinner party at my house, something Sarah and I used to do regularly. But this time, it was filled with new friends. People who never knew me as half of Sarah and me. As we sat around the dining table, laughing and sharing stories, I realized something important. Life doesn't end with betrayal. It just takes a different path. I'm still working long hours, but now it's because I want to, not because I'm trying to fund someone else's dreams. The promotion I got has turned into a career trajectory I never expected. Turns out, when you're not exhausting yourself supporting 3 people, you have a lot more energy for innovation and leadership. Sometimes, I wonder if Sarah and Mike think about the consequences of their choices while lying in their cramped studio apartment. Do they regret it when they're eating ramen noodles instead of the gourmet meals Sarah used to cook in our kitchen? When they're doing laundry at the laundromat because their building doesn't have washers? When they're counting coins to put gas in their car? While I'm parking my new Tesla in the garage of the house that was supposed to be ours? Worried she'd leave him if he didn't provide enough. I shared my story with him, helped him understand that no amount of money can buy loyalty or love. He's since found a better work-life balance, and ironically, his relationship has improved. The Victorian house that was once our shared dream has become my sanctuary. Every room tells a story of renewal, of choosing myself, of building a life that's authentically mine. The garden Sarah designed remains unplanted, but in its place, I'm creating something new. A Japanese Zen garden. A place of peace and meditation. It's different from anything Sarah would have chosen. And that's exactly why I love it. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit in my backyard with a glass of wine, watching the sunset behind the trees Sarah once wanted to fill with wind chimes. I think about how life rarely goes as planned. But sometimes, life's detours lead us exactly where we need to be. I may have lost my wife and my best friend, but I found something more valuable: self-respect, inner peace, and the knowledge that I deserve better than what they offered. As for Sarah and Mike, last I heard, they're still together. Though their true love seems less romantic without the comfort and stability I provided. They're living proof that karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes, just letting people face the consequences of their choices is the best revenge of all. Mike's ex-wife, Katie, told me they tried to get a loan to start their own personal training business, but their credit applications were rejected. Apparently, living rent-free in someone's guest house while sleeping with their wife doesn't count as stable employment history. Sarah's art sales have dropped so low that she's had to start working as a barista at the local coffee shop, the same chain where we first met. Sometimes, karma has a twisted sense of humor. Probably on a mattress on the floor because they couldn't afford real furniture. Do they miss the comfortable life they away? Does their true love feel worth it when they're stretching their last $20 until payday? But those thoughts come less and less now. I'm too busy building my new life, meeting new people, creating new memories in this beautiful house that's entirely mine. Maybe someday I'll share it with someone who understands the value of loyalty and hard work. Until then, I'm content knowing that while they chose each other, I chose myself. Life's funny that way. Sometimes, the worst betrayal leads you to your best life. Just last week, I received an award at work for leading our most successful project to date. As I stood at the podium, looking out at my colleagues, I realized something profound. If Sarah hadn't cheated, if I was still working those insane hours to fund her dreams, I wouldn't have had the energy or focus to achieve this success. My therapist says this is what she calls post-traumatic growth, when you not only survive trauma but become stronger because of it. I've started mentoring younger engineers at work, sharing not just technical knowledge but life lessons too. One of them recently confided that he was working himself to death trying to buy his girlfriend expensive gifts and a big house,